Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into a massively complex and urgent issue that's absolutely dominating the headlines right now, the Indian education system. Honestly, whether you're a student, a working professional, or an employer trying to hire, this directly impacts you. Today, we're not just going to look at what's floating on the surface of the news cycle. We're going to dive deep and analyze the massive structural iceberg hidden underneath. Using data and reports straight from our source material, we're going to map out exactly what's driving this current crisis.
So you've probably seen the outrage. Right now, all across the country, there is a massive clamor for accountability at the very top. People are actively demanding the resignation of the education minister. But, looking at the data, it really forces us to ask a much harder question. Will just changing the face at the top actually solve a crisis that's this deep-rooted? Or is that kind of just treating a symptom while totally ignoring the underlying disease? Let's look at the catalyst that sparked this whole debate.
All right, Section 1, the current education protest, the surface.
The immediate trigger for our analysis today is the highly visible protest led by 59-year-old activist Sonam Wangchuk. He has literally been on a hunger strike at Jantar Mantar in Delhi for 19 days, losing over 9 kilograms in the process. He's demanding strict accountability. Specifically, he wants Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan to resign and take moral responsibility for the disastrous NEET paper leaks. It's an incredibly severe physical toll he's taking just to force a national dialogue about a system that critics argue has completely failed its youth.
Which brings us to Section 2, a cycle of systemic failures. Let's dive right into this because the history here is super revealing. Over the last decade, India has seen a really rapid turnover in leadership. We've actually had 4 different education ministers since 2014: Smriti Irani, Prakash Javadekar, Ramesh Pokhriyal, and currently Dharmendra Pradhan. Now, the source material notes something crucial. Under every single one of these tenures, controversies have persisted. We're talking about everything from debates over a minister's own degrees, to chronically stagnant research funding, to the national education policy basically remaining stuck on paper, right up to the multiple high-profile paper leaks under the current administration. The faces keep changing, but the overarching structural decay, it remains exactly the same. So let's look beneath the surface. Section 3, the deep funding crisis.
60 plus. I want you to really think about that number for a second. Over the past 7 years, there have been more than 60 exam paper leaks. It's a staggering figure, and it directly questions the core integrity of the entire examination system in India. I mean, when millions of students put their lives on hold to prepare for years, only to have the papers compromised repeatedly by organized rackets, it points to a massive systemic lack of safeguards. And that's a failure of accountability that transcends any single politician.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate. Even if a student does manage to clear a perfectly fair exam, who is actually going to teach them? The data shows we are looking at massive teaching vacancies at the absolute highest levels of Indian academia. We're talking about 40% vacancies at the prestigious IITs, 33% at central universities, and almost 32% at the IIMs. You simply cannot build a world-class, globally competitive workforce when almost half of your professors' chairs are just sitting empty. So the absolutely crucial point here is this: how much is India actually investing in its future? The answer is a mere 0.64% of its GDP on research and development. In an era that is completely driven by innovation, artificial intelligence, and deep tech, spending less than 1% on R&D severely stalls global competitiveness. If you're hoping for India to lead the next global tech revolution, well, this number is a massive roadblock. To put that into perspective, innovation-led economies are spending anywhere from 2.5% to 5% of their GDP on R&D. Without real funding, true innovation is basically impossible.
And frankly, what's happening with the funds and focus that do exist? The source material points out a bizarre shift in academic focus, highlighting what critics are calling deeply misplaced priorities. Instead of rigorous scientific research, we're seeing top institutional leaders distracted by pseudoscience. For instance, the source notes an IIT Madras director went viral for promoting the medicinal benefits of cow urine. Or take Galgochia's University, who claimed a Chinese robot dog was their own invention at an AI summit. They even had to withdraw a highly controversial paper claiming that metallic sounds from banging plates could neutralize the COVID-19 virus. Regardless of where you stand, these kinds of distractions undeniably damage the reputation of Indian higher education on the global stage.
Let's shift gears and look outward. Section 4, the India versus China education gap. Let's look at a pretty harsh reality check to see what happens when education becomes a strict strategic priority. India has a massive higher education system. We're talking 4.5 crore or 45 million students. Yet if you look at the 2026 Global Top 100 University rankings, India has exactly 0 institutions on that list. 0. Meanwhile, China has been rapidly climbing the global ladder and now has 3 universities in the top 100, Peking University sitting at 14th, Tsinghua at 17th, and Fudan at 30th globally.
Let's break the numbers down even further. India produces a highly respectable 2.5 million STEM graduates annually. But remember, the R&D spending is under 1%. China, on the other hand, they produce double that, 5 million STEM graduates every single year, and they're growing their R&D budget by about 9% annually. The result of all this investment? China now leads the world in physical sciences and chemistry. They produce around 65% of the cited technical papers in critical areas like battery technology, which directly leads to their dominance in global manufacturing with powerhouse companies like KITL and BYD.
Now, China didn't just stumble into this success by accident. The source material outlines their long-term, highly strategic playbook. It actually started way back in 1986 with a strict 9-year compulsory education mandate. They followed that up with Project 985 and 211, specifically designed to build world-class university labs. And crucially, they launched the 1,000 Talents Plan to reverse the brain drain. By offering highly competitive salaries and massive funding grants, they managed to pull over 1 million overseas Chinese students and researchers back home in 2023 alone. It's a system perfectly aligned to supply talent for their strategic industrial demands.
So, how do we actually fix this? Section 5. Pathways to structural reform.
The craziest part about all of this is that the first, most glaring solution has actually been written down on paper for 60 years. Way back in 1964, the Kotari Commission recommended allocating 6% of the GDP to education. Fast forward to the National Education Policy of 2020, and they repeated this exact same recommendation. Yet actual spending has stubbornly remained flat at around 2.7%. Experts argue that until this chronic underfunding is resolved and capital is aggressively deployed into the system, achieving any fundamental change is virtually impossible.
But look, it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about how we're actually teaching. Right now, data suggests that up to 40% of graduates under 25 are unemployed simply because they aren't industry ready. The companies can't find talent, and the graduates can't find jobs. True higher education reform requires a major 3-step shift. First, integrating practical artificial intelligence tools into everyday learning. Second, moving away from just reading textbooks to actually building real products. And third, transitioning from purely academic professors to training that is led by actual founders and industry leaders who know exactly what the modern market demands.
To give you a concrete idea of what this looks like, the source material highlights the Scalar School of Business as a really functional real-world model of this exact reform. It's an 18-month program based in Bengaluru, where students are taught by founders who have actually built billion-dollar companies. Instead of just reading dusty case studies, the students are building real businesses. Recent batches have launched over 10 no-code AI products, generated actual revenue in the lakhs, and even pitched directly to top industry leaders for real startup investments. It perfectly illustrates that when you align education with practical, industry-driven problem solving, the results are immediate and highly lucrative for the students.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. The data we've explored shows a system that is buckling under the weight of underfunding, massive vacancies, compromised exams, and misplaced priorities. But, as we've seen, the blueprint for change, both financially and structurally, already exists. So the ultimate question is this: is India ready to depoliticize its academic institutions and treat education as its absolute highest strategic priority before the potential of an entire generation is lost forever? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structural breakdown helped you grasp the true scope of the challenge beneath the headlines. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.